All right, guys. Man, I guess I have some type of sadomasochistic thing going on with myself right now. Um, I interviewed Ariel Hawani, who's one of the best MMA journalists in the game, and now I have another one. People that are just better at interviews than me. I suck at them probably compared to their standards. They probably call each other and laugh at how bad I am. But here I am, Damon Martin. What up, man?
What's going on?
How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Of course, anytime.
All right, as we do this, you have to do me a favor, okay?
Okay.
I'm trying to get better at this whole thing, podcasting and interviewing and all of that. So, if you can, try to pay attention to the flow of the conversation, and at the end, I'm going to ask you what I can do better.
Okay.
All right.
I can do that.
All right, because I probably suck at this, and you've been doing it forever.
I have been doing it forever, which is kind of an indoctrination at me being basically an old man. So that's perfectly fine.
It's the same shit with jiu-jitsu. When you get stripes on your belt, everyone wants stripes on their belts as a black belt, but that just means you're old. The only requirement is time once you get your black belt in jiu-jitsu to rank up. So yeah, you don't even have to be good at it anymore. It's like, oh, you're still training, you old fuck.
Oh, you're still here? Here's a stripe for your reward.
It's like opposite of up until the black belt, right? Like up until the black belt, you actually have to do things right and be good. And then once you get your black belt, you just start doing things worse, but you just keep walking in the door.
I said it the other day to somebody. I said, somebody asked me something about how long I've been doing this. And I said, almost 17 years. And I thought about it. I was like, oh my God, 17 years covering this sport. I was like, I can't believe that. That doesn't even seem real to me. How
did you get into it, man? Because you don't, you're not the typical. I said the same thing to Ariel. Like when you didn't fight, you didn't do any of that, right? So how did this all start for you? What made you like mixed martial arts?
Well, I did do jiu-jitsu for a little while and wrestling, but I was more just a fan. I was in high school and a buddy of mine, I was like a sophomore in high school, I think. And a buddy of mine was like, hey, have you heard of this thing called the UFC? And I was like, what's that? And he's like, it's the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And me and my buddies in high school, like every high school kid, are into like martial arts movies, blood sport and stuff like that. And
when was high school for you?
In the 90s, in the early 90s.
Okay, so how old are you?
I am 41.
Okay, so yeah. There we go. So early 90s. Got it.
Yeah. So we were all in a martial arts movie. So anyway, so he's like, hey, have you heard of this thing called UFC? And I was like, no, what is it? And he's like, oh my God, dude, you got to watch this thing. You got to watch this thing. And it was, I don't remember how long after, but it was shortly after UFC 1 had happened. And his mom had allowed him to rent a videotape from the video store. And so I went over to his house after school one day and watched it. And I was just like, what is this? Like, it was just so crazy watching Hoist Gracie go out there and choke everybody out in, 2 minutes or less. And so I was like, wow, this is awesome. And so his mom let us watch UFC 2 on pay-per-view. She let us buy it. And so we got to watch UFC 2 live as it happened. And I was hooked ever since. And then there was a down period where I kind of got out of the sport because the UFC and mixed martial arts kind of went off television. Like they got banned basically. But I remember going to the video store and renting the tapes as they would come out. So I was able to keep up as best as I possibly could.
That's how it happened, right? Like you couldn't watch it live anymore for a while. You had to go find it afterwards.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was gone. Like it was dead in the water. Like you literally had to go like Blockbuster or whatever video store to find the videotapes. And then I kind of followed the sport, kind of forgot about it for a while. And then, basically in 2000, 2001, when Zuffa bought the UFC, I was in college at the time, and I remember picking up a magazine. I can't remember what it was, but maybe it was Maxim or one of those kind of magazines. But they had an interview with Dana White, and they were relaunching the UFC, and they had pictures of Chuck Liddell and Jens Pulver and Tito, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember some of these guys. I read the article and got right back into it. So I think it was like UFC 32 or 31, whatever one's right after was Zuffa purchased the UFC. I kind of got back into it at that point.
Damn, is Maxim even still around anymore?
I think so. I don't know if they're still a magazine. I know they're still online. I don't know if they actually still have a magazine or not.
Yeah, I guess it's such a weird day and age we live in, right? Like, are magazines still a thing?
to a point, I guess. Like when I go to Barnes and Noble, so I buy a book, I see they still have a huge magazine section. So I guess it still exists somewhere out there.
I guess some people like it, right? I guess some people like Playboy instead of YouPorn.
There's got to be. There's got to be, right? Hustler. I mean, there's still got to be a market for it.
Right? I mean, I guess these still pictures get it done for some people, but all right. So damn, so Maxim got you back in, huh?
Yeah, Maxim was an article, and it had like Chuck Liddell. I remember I was in college, and I can't remember how I got the magazine. Maybe it was a friend of mine had it, and I just saw it. But yeah, I just saw like Chuck Liddell and Tito and Jens Pulver and a bunch of fighters, and they said, we're relaunching the UFC, and I just remember I was like, wow, because what I'd followed it. I was always a fan, but what really got me like passionate about it was around UFC 10, I think it was, when Mark Coleman started fighting. Because I was a wrestling guy, and I knew Mark Coleman from Ohio State Wrestling.
God damn, you just love Ohio, bro.
Yeah, I do. And I was like, oh, my God, Mark Coleman, he's fighting. And so then I became, like, really obsessed with that at that point. And then, so, like, whatever it was, like 2001 when Zuffa bought it, I was like, oh, my God, this is the thing. Because they were going back to pay-per-view. I was like, oh, I can actually watch it again. Because, like, there was a period there from, like, UFC 20 to UFC 30, I think it was, where, like, at that point, you couldn't even find the tapes. Like, they were so far gone. Like, you couldn't even go to Blockbuster and find the tapes.
And people have to remember, like, this is, I guess the internet was around, but none of us really had it. We all had dial-up where, like, there was no, to get online to figure out who won a fight. Like, I don't even know if you could do that. Could you back in, like, when they were, you can find out everything on the internet now. If you missed the UFC, you can go on MMA Weekly, you can go on MMA Fighting, you can go on MMA Junkie, all the websites, and just follow along if you're not gonna like steal it.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
So this was not a thing that you could do.
No, not at all.
In
not
the
at all.
mid-90s.
Like back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, when the internet was like really first launching, like you could go online at like the most basic looking, it looked like somebody put it together with construction paper, like it's how the websites look. So you weren't finding anything, without really digging for it. Because back then, I think the only websites that really covered the sport were basically like Full Contact Fighter, Sherdog, and I think MMA Weekly started around that point. But yeah, there was no. I mean, you were searching, and I mean searching for it. And I don't know, like when search engines started, like Yahoo and Google and stuff like that. So like, I don't even know how you found. Like, I can't remember how you found stuff back then.
Yeah, you had. Who knows, man? That's like before time.
Yeah, but the sport was so like the sport was so non-existent at that point. Like it was just like if you were a fan, if you enjoyed mixed martial arts at that point, you had to be a massive hardcore fan because you had to search out this material. There was nowhere you could just go and see this. You could just go to a local sports bar and say, hey, put on the UFC. Like they'd look at you like you were insane. Like, what's the UFC? Much less that we're going to put it on in front of 200 people. So you really had to be a fan to stay a fan of the sport at that point.
Yeah, and for sure. And let me ask you this: so 2001 Zuffa buys, and you're like, oh, you get hooked back in. What does that even mean for you? Like, because I knew what it was like in 2002 to tell my parents that, like, oh, I'm going to fight in the UFC, and they were like, man, motherfucker, we just paid all this money for you to go to college, asshole. What? And at the time, my grandfather was still alive, and he was just like, yeah, no. So what was it like on the journalist side? Like what did you do when Zuffa bought?
Well, at that point, I was still just a fan. I was still just a fan watching it, like anything else. But at the time, when I was in college, I went to the University of Cincinnati. I was going to school to become a writer, and I was a journalist. Okay. Now, they didn't have a journalism program, so I was an English literature major with a journalism focus. So I took all the journalism classes they had, but they didn't actually have a journalism major. But I was working at the University of Cincinnati student newspaper, the News Record, and I was covering sports at that point. So I was covering University of Cincinnati basketball and football, and I was doing some entertainment, selling movie reviews and stuff like that. And so it kind of got the bug in, like, man, I wonder if, like, anyone writes about the UFC. And so I graduated college, and this was a few years down the road. In like 2002, 2003, I was just getting out of college and I was getting into the job market and stuff. And I was just like, I wonder if there's like anyone that actually writes about like UFC, anyone that writes about mixed martial arts. And so I started digging around, and that's when I discovered the website, SureDog and MMA Weekly. And so MMA Weekly actually had a radio show at the time by a guy named Ryan Bennett. And it was like, back then, I think MMA Weekly literally lived up to their name. I think they updated the website like once a week because that's all you could. That's all you could. There wasn't as much news as there is now. So like you would be stretching to update the website once a week. And so I said, back then it wasn't hard to reach out to people. So I reached out and said, hey, I'm a journalist just out of college. I'd love to write about the sport. I love the sport. And, Ryan Bennett actually emailed me back and said, hey, sure, send me something, whatever. And that's literally how it got started. So it was just, like I said, I was a journalist. I was getting out of college, and I was like, hey, I'd like to write about mixed martial arts. And it was easy as that back then.
It's still as easy as that, I think.
Well, if you read some of the stuff out there, I think it is.
Well, I just think, just in general, man, like this is like, I guess, and you'll tell me how I'm doing afterwards. I just asked these questions in the beginning, I think, to try to figure out something to talk about because I don't know. I don't really care about MMA that much. Like I find it interesting, but I don't find it I find people's stories more interesting, like how you got to where you are. And you just sent an email or a text. Was it an email that you sent to Ryan Bennett?
Yeah.
And you just asked, and you just communicated with somebody, and this is just the best way. I mean, it's better than ZipRecruiter. It's better than all these other they work, but man, put yourself out there, right? You just put yourself out there and you were going to really pass or fail right there. There wasn't going to be, man, how do I get more people to see my post or blah, blah, blah. No, you sent it to an actual person, one person, and asked for something.
Yeah, and I think what was obviously much different about that time period is if you were doing it for the love of the sport. You were not doing it because you were suddenly going to become making thousands of dollars. And I wrote about mixed martial arts for free for the better part of 4 or 5 years just because I loved the sport. I had a regular day job and I did things on the side, but I just love the sport. And so, that's a much different mentality now where you actually can make a living and cover the sport for a living as a journalist. Because back then, again, there were like 3 websites and the sport was, when you talk about in its infancy, you look at, the biggest pay-per-views at the time were doing 20,000 sales. So, you got to imagine how many people were actually even watching the sport at that point.
Can I ask you a question? Why do you do it now? Do you do it for an income now or do you do it because you love it still?
Both. This is my full-time job now, but I still love the sport. I watch other sports. I'm a big football fan. I used to watch baseball. I used to watch basketball.
Did you watch Monday? Did you watch the end of that Saints?
The Saints game, yeah. I watched that last night. That was crazy.
Shit.
That was crazy. Actually, when Houston scored the touchdown, I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe they came back. And then
T. Watson's a freak.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Right? Oh my God. And then Houston just fucked up at the end there with that defensive call.
Yeah.
That was the worst call they could possibly make.
And then somehow you end up, it was just like the Saints, it was crazy. I was just like, my God, Drew Brees, was he 41, 42 years old and he's still out there slinging the ball?
It was that crazy, man. No, I disagree with you. He had by when he got the ball, he had to go 40 yards, right? 30 yards. And they had a timeout. And then that last call, okay, so I hate shitting on athletes because they're actually in the moment with no time to think, right?
Right.
Oh God, should I move left or right? Left or right? Fuck, left. Fuck, I was wrong. I should have moved right. God damn it. I'm looking up at the lights, but I think coaches sometimes we can talk about their mistakes a little more. I don't know. I'm a coach now, so I don't mind if people get mad at me. You got to get beat deep for the touchdown on that last play, rather than get beat for 5 yards or 10 yards.
Yeah, trust me. I'm a Bengals fan, so every year is heartbreak for me. So trust me, I fully understand the mechanism of watching a team blow it at the last second.
But that wasn't even the team. The team did what they were told to do. That was all coaching. They were told to play off coverage, right? And to not get beat deep. Well, dude, if you get beat deep, okay, but hopefully you can make the tackle because that's what the prevent defense is, and then that would be more than 2 seconds, and the game would be fucking over.
Well, I tell you what, and this is coming from a guy who played football, and I love football, and I've loved football longer than I've loved MMA. I have never understood the prevent defense. I've always hated that defensive posture on the end of games. I hate prevent defense. I don't understand. I understand when the team's spreading the field and they're sending out, 7 or 8 wide receivers, it seems like, and you got to cover the field. But I have always hated that final, that 2-minute offense, and then the other team always wants to play a 2-minute defense when they play prevent. And I would say 99 times out of 100, it seems like it backfires to me. I hate that defense.
I understand the prevent defense if you're up fucking 20 with 2 minutes left. Sure, let them go score 1 touchdown. Go ahead, have at it. Make it take a minute and a half.
Insane. I hate prevent defense. I hate it.
Yeah. Well, you were winning one way the whole game.
Like I joke about 8 wide receivers. You can only have so many people go down the field looking for a pass. If you have a defensive front line, they're going to eventually get pressure on the quarterback. Why are you dropping your safeties and your cornerbacks 10, 20 yards down the road and just giving up chunks of yardage? Especially in this day and age where guys, like what we saw last night, a guy can get a 58-yard field goal. Like they don't have to get that much. They don't have to get that much yardage to get into place for a freaking 58-yard field goal. Why would you give it? Oh, it drives me insane. I hate prevent defense.
Yeah, I guess I could have seen the prevent in that situation. Maybe if all they needed was if they needed a touchdown.
Yeah.
I guess I could have seen it because there was 2 seconds left and they were on the 47 or 37. 40, let's just call it easy math, right? So you got 2 seconds. They got to throw a Hail Mary now, right? But the prevent defense, when literally they only have to go 40 yards, 50 yards from the start, and there's 40, what was there, 45 seconds left?
Yeah, it was really 47 seconds left.
Yeah, there was 45 seconds left, and they had a timeout.
Yeah, and you're dealing with a guy in Drew Brees who is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, one of the greatest deep ball throwers. Why are you giving him space to work like that? I've always hated that defensive call. I've always hated it since I started watching football, and it never ceases to amaze me how many times teams blow games by playing prevent defense.
Yeah, man, it's not like you were the quarterback and I was the fucking wide receiver. We suck, right? You got a top 5 all-timer back there. What are you doing?
Yeah, you're just begging. You're just begging for disaster to happen, especially considering they just came down and took back the lead. You know what I mean? And then oh my God, it's like there's certain teams. I understand if you're not scared of Andy Dalton, the Bengals quarterback, because I wouldn't be scared of Andy Dalton as the Bengals. But
shit. An actual hater.
Yeah, well, I'm a Bengals fan. But, if you're dealing with Tom Brady, Tom Breeze, even like Cam Newton, guys who can really fling the ball and make big chunks of yards, why are you just giving them 20 yards of play and saying, we're going to tackle them? They try to keep everything within the line so you can't get out of bounds. And I'm just like, it's the dumbest defense in all of football. It drives me insane when I see somebody say they're in a prevent defense.
It's like in fighting it's like when you're fighting not to lose.
Yeah, it's like, remember that fight years ago, and they took a ton of criticism, and I know the guy very well, and I like him very much. Brian Caraway was in a fight, and one of his corner people told him, you're winning, you're cruising, and it was a very close fight, and then he ends up losing the 3rd round. He lost the fight by split decision, I think it was. It's like, you can't tell anybody to just cruise. There's too much danger in this sport to tell anybody just go out there and survive the final round. That's just not the mentality you want to have going into a fight, especially when it's a close fight. I don't care what your corners are telling you, but you're winning, because he wasn't. It was a very close fight, and then he goes out and ends up losing the fight.
All right, so I'm not the best coach in the world, but there are some things that I think I do decently. I was one of my best moments I'm proud of was with Corey when he fought Lineker, and he asked me if he needed the 3rd round. And my response was, you need every round.
Yeah.
Because it's a fight. If you can't slip up. I mean, look, in every other sport, you can slip up for a second, just about. You can recover. You can't do that in fighting. You slip up for a second, it could end. I would never tell someone to cruise. I would say run away for 10 seconds. If the last 10 seconds, I'd be like, go ahead, run. If it was that obvious and you're finding a knockout and you're hurt and yeah, I could see that, but a round, no way. Because then you do the same thing as the prevent, but I don't know, man. You can't cruise in life, man. When can you put the prevent on in your life?
Yeah. Well, with fighting, there's just so many different things, which is one of the reasons I love mixed martial arts. There's just so many things that can happen in a fight. We've seen it a million times over where these kind of crazy. I mean, look at Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. Through 3 rounds, Daniel Cormier, for the most part, was dominating that fight. I mean, obviously, Stipe landed some good punches in there, but Daniel was taking them and continuously coming back with, faster and stronger. It looked like he was en route to winning that fight. And then a little change, alteration in plan. They go to the body and then go to the head, and then boom, he's knocking him out and becoming champion again. You cannot take your foot off. And I don't think Daniel Cormier, who I think is one of the greatest fighters of all time, I don't think in any way, shape, or form he took his foot off the gas. My point being is you can't ever you can't say cruise through the final 2 rounds just because you won the first 3, because there's just too many ways this sport can throw you on your ass.
I'm a pessimist when it comes to coaching fighters. We're always losing unless it's so fucking obvious. In my opinion,
look at this past weekend, the Paul Felder and Barboza. I mean, very close fight. And
who won that fight? I don't know if anybody won that fight.
I don't know. It was close. But when you got one judge scoring at 30-27 for Felder and another guy scoring at 30-27 for Edson, how can you really be sure? You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing if you're going out there and getting a knockdown and you're clearly dominating. Right. There are some fights that are clearly, when it's over, who won. But again, there are other instances where it is a close fight. You can't tell your guy or girl to say, "Oh, just cruise through that final round," or just go out there and avoid taking punches. Like, you've got to be minded that you got to go out there and win the fight. You got to take it.
And in the particular case that you just brought up, the Edson and Felder fight, I mean, you could see it that way. I could see 30-27 either way. Yeah. Whether you agreed fully or not. Because people think that 30-27 is a rout. 30-27 is not a rout. It's 3. It could be a rout. It could definitely be a rout. But it could also be literally 3 rounds where it was super even, and then in the last 15 seconds, somebody gets a takedown. Yeah. Wins the round.
I have a lot of problems with the 10-point must system in MMA.
What's your problem with it?
Everything, especially when you're talking 3 judges in 3 rounds. I just don't think it's a good way to score fighting. I mean, you're talking about 3 rounds. It's like I'm a big believer in referees, refereeing a fight, officiating a fight. When I say take away points, I don't want to penalize fighters for accidents, but there's so many times you see fighters have multiple groin shots or multiple eye pokes or multiple fence grabs, and no one ever pays for it. So I'm a big believer in the official using their job to say, hey, you keep doing this, you're going to lose a point and take away a point. The disastrous thing is if you lose a point in mixed martial arts in a 3-round fight, you've pretty much doomed yourself to either a draw or you've got to blow out those other 2 rounds. And so that's a problem. And then the idea that it's 10-point must is 10-9, 10-9, and you rarely see a 10-8. And when you do, the fight the other night between Habib and Poirier, a lot of people said there should have been a 10-8 round in there in round 1.
Round? I read that too. What?
Yeah, but there's so much inconsistency. That's the problem. I think I understand there's problems in the Pride and one championship, that type of score. I get it. I understand there are going to be problems with that kind of scoring as well. But to me, the chances of screwing up saying who won the entire fight versus, who won round by round, and then at the end of the night, feeling somebody got robbed, there's just too many variables in a 10-point must system, especially in a 3-round fight, because that's what you will get controversial decisions in boxing. We see it all the time. But the likelihood of that is a lot less when you're scoring over 12 rounds. There's a lot of variance in 12 rounds versus 3 rounds. You have 3 rounds to win a fight, and that's it. And if anything goes wrong in those 3 rounds, like I said, you give up a late takedown, you get a point taken away, even if it's an accidental point taken away. These are all factors that can completely ruin the fight for you because you only have 3 rounds and you only have a chance to earn 30 points over 3 rounds. There's just so many problems with the 10-point must system. I hate it. I've hated it for years. And unfortunately, in America anyways, I don't think it's ever going to change.
It's not going to change. My biggest problem with it is I don't understand why we have 10 points because we don't fucking use them.
Yeah.
When's the last time you saw a 10-2?
Yeah. Well, and that's
why do we have 10 points?
Well, and I've seen, and I've talked to judges and I've talked to commissions, and they have, like I've talked to Andy Foster, they have the refereeing and judging program, and I've read judging criteria. Again, I've been around the sport for a long time. I've read judging criteria front and back, sideways. And there are times when a fight is over and I'm literally thinking to myself, what in the hell was this judge watching? Like, what fight were they watching? And if they were watching it, they surely weren't scoring it by the criteria that they're supposed to be scoring it by.
Man, I can only go off my experiences sometimes with that. And when I fought Brandon Vera, at the end of the fight, I armbar him, right? And I break his arm. And it wasn't a weird scramble. Like, he was laying flat on his back and I was laying flat on my back and pulling his arm, right? And I see one of the judges and I lost the fight. I didn't lose the fight, but I lost the fight. I see one of the judges in the casino afterwards, and I was like, man, what's somebody got to do to get a 10-8, And he's like, he says something. I was like, well, he said something about the striking. And I say, well, dude, what about the armbar? And he goes, oh, you armbarred him? Damn, dog, I must have missed that.
Oh, my God. I
was like, what?
Oh, my God.
He was like, my bad, man, next time. And I was like, next time. All right. Well, there was no next time. And which I'm not sad about or anything, but still, yeah, what the fuck were you watching?
Yeah, that kind of mentality is what worries me and scares me when you're talking about, and I have issues with the whole, win bonus, structure in this sport. I really don't like that either. Where you're basically holding half a guy's money hostage, based on, judges getting it right, which in a close fight, I would say it is literally 50-50 whether they get it right or wrong. And you're holding a fighter's life, in the balance of whether they're going to make their rent payment for the next 3 months.
David,
versus
don't leave it to the judges, man.
Yeah, exactly. But and that's the issue.
No, don't leave it to the judges, man.
But you wonder sometimes what they're watching, and then as a guy, I'm a wrestler.
You have no comment.
Here's the thing: when they say don't leave it in the hands of the judges, like that, they literally put that on the wall at the Ultimate Fighter gym, where it's in the hands of the judges. Listen, I get it. I understand the mentality of going out there and finishing, but when you're at the highest level of the sport, or even not the highest, there's going to be times where you're not going to finish your opponent. You should be able to count on the judges sitting, cage side to get it right. I mean, look at Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers of all time. He hardly ever finished anybody, but did that take away from his greatness that he was he's a shit person, but a phenomenal boxer? I don't think you should be penalized just because you can't finish a guy. I don't think you should lose. I don't think you should be punished by a crappy judge just because you couldn't go out there and knock the guy out or get a submission. I think it's terrible. You can't depend on these judges to get it right.
And for me, look, I think the 3-round thing, I think it plays into that. So you have to go play and look, we all can't be Nate Diaz. We all can't go out there and kill or be killed. Everyone's not that gangster. He's that gangster, right? But not everyone is. And sometimes it takes a minute or maybe 12 to get a guy to the point where he's done.
Yeah.
And now here you are. Now you're going for the next 3 minutes where you're trying to finish. But you can't, when you go balls to the wall from the gate, man, you are taking a huge and massive risk of getting finished yourself.
Yeah, let me give you a perfect example of the judging problem with the 10-point must system. This past weekend, the women's fight, the strawweight fight between JoJo Calderwood and Andrea Lee, the first 2 rounds were painfully close. You know what I mean? Andrea, I thought, you get the takedown late. She had some good ground and pound. First round.
Yep.
Second round, very, very close. Hard to score. Very, very close. But I think at the time I scored it for Andrea Lee. But again, it was a matter of inches. Which fight, which way did you want to score? Very close fight. So
I scored it for Calderwood. I thought Calderwood got it.
But that's the point. So it's very close. Sure. So round one, Andrea. Round 2, very close. Round 3, I thought JoJo really poured it on. She had a lot more strikes. Andrea was slowing down. JoJo, in my opinion, clearly won the third round. I thought the third round of the 3 rounds was the most dominant of the 3 rounds. JoJo clearly won that third round. Now, if you're scoring the whole fight, a very close second round and a dominant third round, and you're scoring the whole fight, I would say JoJo Calderwood won that fight. But based on the 10-point must system, the first round went to Andrea. The second round, again, I edged it toward Andrea. And again, remember, judges, when you're sitting cage side, they take their scores after every round. You can't at the end change your mind and say, oh, I actually think she won the fight. So, boom, JoJo goes out and, in my opinion, has the best round of the fight in the third round. But I'd already scored Andrea winning rounds 1 and round 2. So guess what? Andrea Lee wins that fight, even though at the end of the fight, I think JoJo ultimately had the better performance. I can't take back the fact that I somehow saw round 2 for Andrea Lee versus you saw for JoJo Calderwood. And now, JoJo won the fight. But I'm saying if I was one of those judges, in my head, I would have said to myself, I think JoJo won that fight. But because I'd already scored rounds 1 and round 2 for Andrea Lee, she would have won. That's a problem.
You would have been the judge sitting cage side going, fuck, man, did I really just give this fight to this other person?
Yeah.
And you did.
Yeah, and that's the problem right there. And we've seen it 1,000 times where there's 2 really close rounds, and maybe in the third round, maybe the first round, the guy goes out there and just completely blows the guy out of the water. It's clearly a 10-9, probably should have been a 10-8. And then, maybe he slows down. Maybe the gas tank drains a little bit after trying to go for the finish. Rounds 2 and 3 are very close. And then the other guy ends up getting the decision because 2 and 3 were very close. Yet round 1 was by far the most definitive round of the fight where you clearly saw the difference in skill sets. And then round 2 and round 3 were just closer. And you could say, you could give it to either guy. But then because maybe the 2 judges give it 2 rounds to the other guy, he wins the fight, and that's a problem. Like I said, I think scoring the whole fight, and yes, there's a myriad of problems you could point out there too. A lot of sketchy decisions in Pride and one and other things like that. But by and large, I think you're going to have a much better system of scoring fights the right way when you score the fight as a whole. And if you're actually scoring it by the criteria, which again, that's a requirement.
I think we're getting better at that.
Yeah. We are seeing fight. I can't remember what fight it was. There was a fight recently where there was a guy on the bottom applying his jiu-jitsu game, his ground game, and he was going for submissions, and he was constantly threatening. And the guy on top was literally just basically trying to get out of submissions, stave off being reversed. That's literally all he was doing. Didn't throw a punch, didn't throw an elbow, was just defending from the top. And when the scorecards came out, they ended up giving the guy on the bottom the round. Now, think of that from 8 or 9 years ago. You would have never seen that. Guy on the bottom loses. Guy on the bottom loses. That's it. You're on the bottom.
Used to give if the bottom fighter put the top fighter in a triangle and then a guillotine and then an arm lock and then a kimura, they used to see it as, man, what great defense from the guy on top, which is defense doesn't win fights. Like, we know it does, but you can't win on defense. Yeah. Right. Like, at the end of the day, if the guy throws 100 punches at you and you dodge 90 of them and get hit with 10 of them and you hit them with 0 punches, you lose. Yeah. Right. You lose. So the defensive argument is no good. And I agree. We're starting to see the opposite. So
we're starting. It's not perfect. It's like the old day. Remember what was it? Cecil Peoples, who always forever live in infamy of the guy who said he didn't score leg kicks.
Leg kicks.
It's like, when you tell Edson Barbosa you're not going to score leg kicks. Tell Jose Aldo you're not going to score leg kicks. So we're getting better. I will say we are getting better with the judges. The education is getting better. But
look, I love me some Cecil, but he's the one who missed my armbar.
Yeah, so it's like, it's like we're getting, and I think as time, we have to remember the sport is very young, but I think we're starting to see better and better. Like with the refereeing, you're seeing guys like Frank Trigg, who's now a referee, a guy who was a fighter.
Yeah, I was going to totally bring this up. This is man. We need people, the retired guys, we need to be coaching. We need to be refereeing. We need to be judging, right? We need to be getting in there. If we want the sport to be better, it's on us. Like, I know we've been complaining and talking about what's wrong, but it's our fault if it stays wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, and that's why I get so excited when I see Frank Trigg refereeing a fight. Like, I have faith in Frank Trigg because Frank Trigg has been in there. Shaolin Hibero, phenomenal fighter in his right. Now he's doing refereeing and things like that, I believe, in New York, on the East Coast. That's the kind of – we need those guys. There was a time when Ricardo Almeida was getting involved, and then he ended up, staying on the coaching side more. But that's what we need. We need guys who are involved in the sport, who have been in the sport, who have done the sport, who know the sport, to get involved in judging and refereeing. And those are the guys you can depend on. Because, listen, like Herb Dean, I know Herb Dean's made some callback. Listen, you're going to make bad – unfortunately.
We're going to have bad calls. It's people.
Yeah, but Herb is a guy who has fought. He knows the sport. He knows it. And then you get a guy who makes a boneheaded call on like a guillotine choke when a guillotine choke isn't actually in, and they stop the fight when the guy clearly wasn't out. And you're like, A, what was this guy watching? And B, has he ever been in a guillotine choke? Was he, like, I'm not a fighter. I'm not, but I have practiced jiu-jitsu. I know what it feels like to be in a guillotine choke. I know what it feels like to be in an arm bar. I know what it feels like to be in a triangle choke. And I've seen it. I've gone through it myself, but I've also seen people firsthand doing it. And I know the intricacies of that. I've been to Henzo Gracie's Academy, and I've sat there and watched guys roll for hours, just watching them roll and watch John Danaher teach. And I watch these guys, and I'm just like, you need to be in there. You need to see this kind of stuff up close before you're stepping into a cage or a ring and saying, oh, well, that guy's out. You got to know this better than just watching. You got to be there firsthand to understand it.
I agree. Let me ask you another question. I 100% agree. I'm going to go back to something you said earlier, though. Do we see DC Stipe 3?
Oh, man, I think so. I think we do.
You do?
I have a hard time believing Daniel Cormier. I know Daniel Cormier pretty well. I have a hard time believing he's going to step away off a loss like that in a fight that he was doing so well. I just have a hard time. I don't think it's going to be tomorrow. I think it's going to be a while. I think when you're a heavyweight and you take punches, you get knocked out, man. It's like Stevie being out for a year. I think that actually helped him. People said, oh, you've been out for a year, you didn't come back. I think it's better for him. He went through a battle with Francis Ngannou, then he got knocked out by Stipe. That guy needed to be out for a year. He needed to let his brain recover, let his head recover before he stepped back in there, and we saw a difference. You saw the punches he took. He could take the punches.
Yeah, he took punches.
Yeah.
That's what I was impressed with, really, because I was like, damn, he's taken the punches where, I didn't think he went out, he knocked him out for sure the first time, but I didn't think the punch that DC landed in that first fight was that hard. And who knows, I wasn't the one taking it, but I felt like he took way harder punches in this fight.
Yeah. I think that year off was beneficial to him. And so I think if DC comes back, I think it's got to be, July next year or June next year, something like that. But I just have a hard time believing he's going to walk away with that being his final fight. Because the Jones fight's gone. He's not going to get that fight now. I don't think he was ever going to go back to 205 pounds. The fight, if he's going to retire on, is going to be Stipe. And listen, who wouldn't watch that? The first two fights happened. Who wouldn't watch that?
Epic.
Yeah, who wouldn't watch that? And I feel bad for a guy like Francis Ngannou, who has clearly earned a title shot. You got there and knock out JDS. You knocked out Cain Velasquez.
I have to say, I think we're going to see Ngannou Stipe 2 first.
You think so?
Yeah, man. You think Stipe is going to sit out for a year as well?
I think he could. And I think
he could.
Here's the thing. And I think
we'll see an interim heavyweight title then.
And here's the problem with the stature of where we're at in the sport with these interim titles and things like that. Like, I remember back in the day, you remember when Frank Mir got into his motorcycle accident? You remember that? Yeah. And it was terrible. He had one of the biggest wins of all time going out there and beating Tim Sylvia the way he did, breaking his arm. And then he gets in this terrible motorcycle accident. And they knew he was going to be out for a good long time. And it took a while before they finally, they gave Andrei Arlovsky, he ended up winning the interim title, but they let him stay interim champion. They didn't determine he was the real champion for a long time when they realized Frank wasn't. We didn't. But my point being is like, I think every case has to have its own scenario. Like, I think Dustin Poirier is phenomenal. I love Dustin. Okay. So it's not on him, but we knew Habib was going to be out for 9 months with a suspension, but he wasn't injured. He didn't tear his ACL, and he wasn't going to be out for a year and a half or something crazy like that. We knew he was coming back. He was just under a suspension. Why are you crowning an interim champion other than you want to have a championship fight at the headline of a card? We knew Habib was the best lightweight in the sport. We knew he, and the thing is, he wasn't even out a year. He won that. He beat Conor last October. He just won his fight. So it hadn't even been a year yet. If he had to sit out that 9-month suspension and then at the end of that 9-month suspension he blows out his knee and he's going to be out for another year, okay, then I see you crowning an interim champion. But he wasn't even out. He wasn't even out a year.
I agree with you, man. There are people that have title, and it's so hard because it's not their fault. It's not Poirier's fault. It's not Colby Covington's fault that they have belts that they're not really belts, right?
Well, the UFC has created this culture of, putting on so many shows, and they always want a title fight. But look what they just did. They made this fight between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. Everyone is excited about this fight, and it's a non-title fight. You don't have to have a title on the line to get people hyped up about a fight. And like I said, I mean, I get it. Like Robert Whittaker, we knew he was going to be out over a year. When he went through his whole situation, we knew he was going to be out for over a year. So I get why you crown an interim champion maybe in that particular situation.
When's the last time he fought?
It was the last June. So it's been a little over a year now when he fought Yoel Romero. So
right. So it makes sense that we have an interim title there.
Yeah. But even that, they crowned the guy in April. So it was before a year. It hadn't even been a year technically. Now, we knew he was going to be out more than a year.
We knew he wasn't going to make it a year, though. I think, So I don't have a problem with that one, right? Because because Israel got it in April, and we knew Robert wasn't going to be able to fight towards to the end of this year. Yeah. So we knew that was a year and a half. So, okay, crown the interim champ, and then – but then the next immediate fight, Israel's fine waiting 5 months to fight, right? Like the next immediate fight, like you got Colby, who's never lost. You got Tony Ferguson, who's never lost with belts. And and I get it from the fighter's mind. They're like, no, man, fuck you. I'm the champ. Right?
Yeah. And it's like if Stipe, I mean, he won the fight, but it was a war. He took some shots in there, and heavyweight is a different animal. You know what I mean? You take shots at heavyweight, that's some serious damage. If he wants to sit out till June or July and give Cormier the rematch, I mean, who are you? I mean, I feel for a guy like Francis Ngannou who deserves it and earn. I get it. I understand his frustration, but
what fight do they give Ngannou, man?
I don't know. I mean, listen, I talked to Ngannou a couple weeks ago. He's taking some time off to shoot this Fast and the Furious film. He's doing that thing, which is awesome. Maybe you just, listen, maybe you have him as a backup, and if someone gets injured in training, you have him jump in and fight the other guy, maybe. But yeah, I really do. I feel for a guy like that. But if Stipe if Stipe wants to take time off and let his brain recover, and if DC decides, hey, I want to come back and fight one last fight, my retirement fight for the title, you got to do it. And I really do feel for a guy like Francis Ngannou who kind of gets screwed in that situation. But we got to be honest, it's a rare situation in this sport where that really happens. You know what I mean? Where you really, because when DC moved up from light heavyweight to heavyweight to fight for the title the first time, everyone said, well, he's jumping divisions, he's jumping the line. He wasn't really. The guy who was supposed to be the next guy in line was Francis Ngannou, and he had just lost to Stipe. There was no other guy right there at that moment who should have fought Stipe, who DC cost a title shot. You know what I mean? When DC moved up, there was nobody there that you said, oh, my God, I can't believe they're giving DC this title shot over such and such fighter. You know what I mean? So you feel for Francis. You feel for him not getting it, but this is just one of those scenarios in sport where you got to do what's right. And what's right in my mind is giving DC and Stipe the time they need to recover. And if they want to do it a third time, they do it a third time.
When's the last time they did what's right, though?
That's a deep question right there. That's a very deep. Right? Look at Tony Ferguson. Look at that poor guy. You know what I mean? 12 fight wins straight.
Hold on. Not even that, man. Let's back up a second. They're going to crucify Conor for what he did in the bus incident. And then they're going to crucify Khabib for jumping over the cage in that whole incident. And then they use that footage as promotion.
Yeah. Well, and then Dana, after the whole UFC 229 debacle happens, he says anyone involved in that brawl will never fight in the UFC again. Not only did Zubaira Tukhugov end up fighting this past weekend, they signed Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov to the UFC, and he wasn't in the UFC, and he was involved in that brawl. Now, I'm not saying those guys should have been kept out. I understand the tensions were heated, whatever. But don't say it, and then 6 months later, not only are you giving the guy a fight, you actually sign the other guy.
Yeah, but I think the other part was, I think the using the footage is worse.
It is.
Because Dana, you know how Dana is. Dana pops off at the mouth and yada, yada, right? And that's heat of the moment too, right? That's heat of the moment too. And then he's like, wait a minute, I can't fucking back that up, blah, blah, blah. But when you're sitting there going, all right, how are we going to promote? You don't need Khabib jumping over the cage and fighting to promote a Khabib fight.
Yeah.
Right? He could be the GOAT. He's never fucking lost in an actual real MMA fight. Like you don't need the craziness. Who's going to be like?
Why are you promoting a fight with Poirier with him jumping over the cage in the Conor fight? I get it. I understand it if he rematches Conor and you want to show it. But why are you showing that to promote the Poirier
fight? Yeah. I'm sorry. You said it better than me. Like I know they're going to do it in the Conor fight. Yeah. You know that if that, and I agree with Khabib. Fuck you. You don't get to fight again. Fuck off. Like how Dana said that's the next fight if Tony Ferguson won't sign. What?
Yeah.
What? He hasn't won a fight in like 3 fucking years. And 2, I get it in that fight to use like footage like that, but not in the Poirier fight.
Yeah, and the funny thing was Khabib and Dustin were so respectful towards each other. That I mean, I know, I admit I get into the Conor McGregor, antics. He's funny. He brings an energy to the sport that maybe we have never had before. He is one of the most prolific trash talkers of all time. And while he definitely goes over the line, I think some of the stuff he said about Khabib was definitely over the line. But like, think about that Rafael dos Anjos thing when he said the red panty night. How funny was that? Like just amazing. In that moment.
It's amazing.
Conor absolutely has his place in the sport, and I love Conor. But the moment after Khabib and Dustin, finished their fight, Dustin's heartbroken. Obviously, biggest moment of his career, he fell short. For Khabib to put on Dustin's T-shirt and in the cage say, I'm going to help out his charity. I mean, that's the best of the sport. Like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, man, that just shows you, like, what this means to these guys. Like, some things are bigger than the sport. And, Khabib is celebrating, he hasn't fought in Russia in the UFC yet, but hopefully eventually he will. But that was a very pro-Khabib crowd. His father was in his corner for the first time ever. You could understand the emotions got the better of him. But still, in that moment, he's giving Dustin's shirt. And I want to declare in that moment, in his celebration, he's going to say, I want to give, I want to do this auction for Dustin's chair. That's the best of this sport, man. Like, that should just make you be like, man, there are good people involved in this sport, and you don't need to trash talk. But then you go back to the promo, and they're showing that crap, which had absolutely nothing to do with the fight.
Yeah. I have to say, I think one of the funniest things that Khabib has ever done for me, or when he was after the Conor fight, when he's sitting there in the press conference and they're talking to him about like the repercussions, and he's like, "Man, I'm in so much trouble." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "My dad's going to kill me."
Yeah, like that's the kind of stuff. But like you see the best of the sport. And like I said, I get it, man. I like the trash talk. I like the heated rivalries as much as anyone. I love the Jones Cormier stuff. I get it. You know what I mean? But not everything's going to be that. And I appreciate the honor. At the end of the day, we all got involved where, most of us got involved because of martial arts. And martial arts is very much about honor. You don't go out trying to kill your opponent. You don't go out trying to just hurt your opponent. It's a competition, and there's honor in martial arts. And I understand, listen, I get into it, you get into it, we all get into some of the fiery side of stuff, but not everything is going to be that way. And like, Khabib is you can argue all day. I think he's the greatest lightweight fighter of all time right now. Now, does that mean he's going to stay the greatest? No, but right now I think he is. And he is a very popular guy, very well-known guy. You don't need that. You don't need that to promote his fight. I don't think there's a single person on this planet that bought that pay-per-view or tuned in because Khabib jumped over a cage in this Conor fight, and now he's fighting. Like, nobody
Not
did.
one person. Yeah.
Nobody did.
Let me ask another question. What do you think of the champ?
Which one?
Just the idea of champ.
Man, I don't like it anymore. I liked it at first because it was a rare, unique thing, because you remember for years we wanted Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre. Everybody wanted that fight. Everybody wanted that fight. Teased forever, every post-fight press conference. What about Anderson? What about GSP? We never got it. And so when we finally got that chance to see a champion from one division go to a champion of another division, BJ did it with GSP, but that fight was more about rivalry than titles. I have to remind myself sometimes there were titles on the line.
But BJ was never champ.
No, but I'm saying he tried. He went up from lightweight and fought George at welterweight, but at that point there was so much heat between those two that you kind of forgot titles were on the line. You know what I mean? Like, that was just one of those.
BJ wasn't the champ of lightweight, though. He could have never been a champ.
He was lightweight champ when he fought GSP the second time, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
You know better than me.
So he that was a great rivalry that also had a title, on the line in that moment. But like when Conor did it, and even though we got to be honest, Conor didn't deserve it, based on it. But I tell people, here's my favorite thing to tell people in mixed martial arts, Eliot. I say all the time, if you want to stay sane watching and or covering this sport, strike the word deserves out of your vocabulary, because you'll lose your mind with the whole deserves thing, because it never happens. But my point is, Conor didn't really deserve that shot at that point. He had just beaten Diaz, hadn't defended his featherweight title, and they're going to give him a title shot. But I was at Madison Square Garden that night. That was an incredibly awesome moment to see Conor jump on that cage, 2 belts in hand. The champ does that, whatever the fuck he wants. Like, it was just a really cool moment. But unfortunately, it's lost its kind of specialness, because now everybody's trying to do it and no one's really earning it. Like, I think Henry Cejudo is phenomenal. I do. I think Henry Cejudo, I don't disagree with him saying he's one of the greatest combat sport athletes of all time when you look at his wrestling and everything. But he had beaten DJ, which, again, kudos. Demetrius Johnson, one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he beat TJ Dillashaw. And I get it, because he beat TJ at flyweight, why you want to book him going up to bantamweight. But then you think about all the bantamweights who had to wait in line because the guy jumped the line when there were bantamweights in line. And you look at, it's just like you feel bad. Like no one's, like when GSP and Anderson were going to do it, there was no doubt they were the 2 best guys in their weight class. George was the greatest welterweight. Anderson was the greatest middleweight. Putting them together seemed like a foregone conclusion. They just never did it. But when you have everybody,
no one was beating either one of them, right?
Yeah, and when you have all these people jumping up in divisions and wanting to jump up in divisions, and I said this the other day on Twitter, and I really do mean this, when Khabib said, I'm not moving divisions, I'm staying at 155, I said, everyone's talking about champ, and I want to be the champ, and I want to be the double champ. I said, look at how hard it is just to defend your title. The longest reigning champion in the UFC right now is Amanda Nunes with 4 defenses. That's it, 4 defenses, which when you think about it, it is a lot when you think about who she's beaten. But that's not like when you think about George St. Pierre had 9, and maybe would have gone beyond that had he not retired or had he not.
What did Anderson have?
Anderson had 10. Demetrius had 12. But you think about how hard it is to stay champion. DC got 1 title defense as heavyweight. You know what I mean? You think about some of the greatest fighters. The people you look at and say, "Wow!" Jose Aldo, I think had 7, maybe 8. I think 7 or 8 is when he got beat. You think about these champions who have these great, historic records. Ronda Rousey. Say what you will about Ronda. Ronda gets a lot of hate these days, but she had 5 title defenses, like 5 or 6. Yeah, 5 or 6.
Ronda deserves all the hate she gets, man.
Well, no, I'm saying like in terms of what she did at the time she was in the sport. 5 or 6 title defenses, which is still the record. No woman has come close to that. You look at Jessica Andrade, just lost. Didn't even get 1 title defense. Rose Namajunas had 1 title defense against the person she beat to get the title. I think. And, you go down, it's impossibly hard. The longest reigning lightweight champion of all time has 3 defenses in the UFC. That's it. 3.
BJ?
BJ and Vincent Henderson both had 3. That's it. That's how hard it is to defend a title. So when you talk about these champ scenarios, like I kind of hate that we've gotten into the mindset where like Khabib has to defend himself staying at just 155. Like, why? You know what I mean? If Khabib goes out there and beats, are you going to tell me? Are you going to tell me that if Khabib goes out there and beats Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, and let's say Justin Gaethje, just throwing out a number, then maybe he beats Conor again. Maybe Conor does earn his way back. He beats all those guys. He's 32-0 or 31-0 at that point. Are you going to try to tell me that Khabib is any less of an all-time great or any less of a phenomenal fighter that he didn't go up and win the 170-pound belt or the 100, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to tell me that Henry, and I love Henry, I'm not knocking Henry, I'm just using him as an example. Yeah, you're going to tell me, as a guy who has 1 defensive flyweight and just won the bantamweight title, because he has 2 titles on his shoulders, you're going to tell me that guy is better than Khabib Nurmagomedov if he goes to that? That's what I'm saying. Like that, let me
ask you a question. Who's your GOAT?
Of all time?
Yeah.
John Jones.
Okay, and how many weight divisions does he have the title in? 1. And who's number 2 at GOAT?
George St. Pierre.
And how many?
He finally did go to middleweight once, but that's it.
You're right. Yeah,
he did once.
That was more of a super fight, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't. But you don't remember George. You're not going to remember George because he beat Michael Bisping. No. You're going to remember him for what he did at welterweight.
Right. And who's your next greatest?
Man, it's tough when you go down the line. I mean, it depends on how you want to feel about the whole drug testing thing, but I think you got to put someone like Anderson Silva in that conversation. Yeah.
And how many championship weight classes?
He won one championship at middleweight. He fought at light heavyweight, never won a title at light heavyweight.
Right.
Yeah.
And he fought at light heavyweight sometimes just to fill in for fights. Like his fight with DC was a fill-in fight.
Yeah. Fought James Irvin, things like that.
James Irvin, Stephen Bonner, right? Yeah, of course. And Forrest Griffin.
Yeah.
And they were amazing fights, but never a champ, right? So, man, the three greatest of all time only have 4 weight divisions in between them.
Yeah, and that's why I say about John Jones all the time, like, how are you going to tell me John Jones, you can have your opinion about John Jones, and you can say you don't think he's the GOAT or not. I do. But you can say, but are you going to tell me that you think that he's not as skilled as a fighter because he didn't go to heavyweight? That's just nuts to me. Like, I don't think, weight classes exist for a reason. Like, if George St. Pierre never came back and never fought Bisping, you're going to tell me that George St. Pierre wasn't already one of the greatest fighters of all time with what he did at welterweight, in my opinion, one of the greatest divisions of the sport. And when you think about how deep those divisions were when he was champion, think about guys who never won titles. At his best, Josh Koscheck was a monster. He was a monster. John Fitch was a monster. None of those guys even sniffed the title because George was around. And you think about that.
They sniffed it. They fought George.
Yeah, they fought George. They fought George and got dominated. And that's what I'm saying. You're going to tell me. They sniffed it.
Yeah. But hold on, man. I never sniffed a title shot. Those guys sniffed a title shot.
Yeah, but you're going to tell me that George is less of a champion or less of an all-time great if he hadn't come back? Like, you're going to judge George St. Pierre because of one fight with Michael Bisping? No, you're not. No one is.
I mean, it helped.
I mean, if you want to have that argument about how he capped off his career and how he closed things out, yeah. I mean, listen, I think George and John are 1 and 2 interchangeable. To my opinion, depends on how you want to shake out. I think John goes a little ahead for me personally, just because in terms of skill, some of the things I've seen him do just blow me away. When he choked out Machida, when he beat Daniel Cormier, who, again, I think Daniel's a top 5 guy. I think Daniel would probably be number 4 or 5 on that list, depending on how you want to shake it out. To beat him twice, I know the second time with the controversy and everything, but and then the list of champions: Shogun, Machida, Rampage, all the guys he's beaten. And the way he's beaten most of them, I think he's number 1. But you can say George is number 1. I would be okay with that. He did it all the right way. Never had any kind of drug testing controversy.
I had Anderson at number 1 until he's done this whole keep fighting thing.
Yeah, you can. I mean, look, dude, and I mean, think about BJ Penn. Think about where we're at with BJ Penn now. I mean, where that guy was, 8 years ago versus today.
Yeah, I mean, so mine was Anderson, George, BJ, John Jones.
Yeah.
That's how I had it. So, but, what was I going to say? Sorry. But yeah, the whole keep fighting thing with Anderson, I respect him for doing it because he doesn't care. He's fighting the monsters still, but it definitely has taken him out of the GOAT conversation. It's moved him down. But I think his run is more impressive than anyone's run.
Yeah. Well, I had this argument not that long ago on Twitter when I said I think Stipe Miocic, by beating Daniel Cormier and avenging that loss, I think he has separated himself into that conversation, the greatest heavyweight, because when you think about who he's beaten and how he's beaten him at a time when I think the heavyweight division is very deep right now and very good, and you think about Verdum and you think about, JDS, you think about Ngannou, and then you think about DC, that's an incredible run. And everyone, of course, freaked out and said Fedor. And I love Fedor, man. I own 2 mixed martial arts T-shirts. Okay, I own 2 mixed martial arts T-shirts. One is a WEC shirt somebody gave me when WEC was around, and they said, "Hey, you got a WEC shirt?" And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome." And I kept it because WEC went away, and I always thought that was a really cool organization. 2 is the old Fedor shirt that says "Nobody Beats Me." Do you remember that shirt? Had Fedor's face on one side and it said "Nobody Beats Me" down the side. Somebody gave me that shirt when he was fighting in Pride. And I always kept it because I was like, Fedor's an icon. I'm keeping this T-shirt. I am a huge Fedor guy. But when you start breaking down, the guys he beat at the time, and then you look at what he's done late in his career, and everyone say, well, he's not in his prime anymore. But you can't just ignore 9 fights in his career because maybe he went too far in his career. You can't not judge him a little bit based on that. You can't say they don't count. They do count.
Look, watching Roy Jones be face down on canvases has, he was the best ever in my opinion to a point, and then
you right? can't ignore it. I mean, you just can't ignore
it. It happened. Yeah.
And
only thing we can ignore, the only thing in sports that we can ignore that doesn't count is the Michael Jordan Washington Wizard years, because he's the GOAT of all sports. Right? What are you talking about? He played for the Wizards? I don't remember that, Eliot. What are you talking about? No, he didn't play for the Wizards. His last game was that shot against Utah in 98. That was it, man. That was it. But other than that, you gotta remember this shit, right?
The thing, and that's the thing about. But see, we're talking about sports here. Basketball is a different sport. Like, it's depressing to think about Michael Jordan in a Washington Wizards outfit. But at the end of the day, he was still scoring 20 points, and he was just playing with a bad team, and he was old, and he wasn't the same Michael Jordan. But in fighting, in boxing, and mixed martial arts, guys or girls are getting laid out. Yes. You're remembering the images of like Fedor. I was at the fight when Fedor got knocked out by Dan Henderson. Great fight. And then you think about it, Dan Henderson, one of the all-time greats as well. But, again, not a knock on Dan Henderson. Dan Henderson is realistically a middleweight. He should not be going out there and knocking out the greatest heavyweight of all time, unless maybe the greatest heavyweight of all time stuck around past his prime. But you can't forget that fight. You can't forget him face down on the canvas and Dan Henderson on top of the cage celebrating. You can't just ignore that.
You can't go like – yeah, like in basketball, that'd be like Michael Jordan's team losing to a fucking high school team.
Yeah.
Or maybe a Division II.
But again,
it doesn't happen.
The visual is still different, though. It's different when you see a guy not hit that. When you think of Jordan, you think of him driving down, making the crossover on the Utah Jazz and hitting that shot to win the game, that Byron Russell. You think about those kind of moments in his career. But with fighting, you're thinking about guys getting laid out cold. Your memory is, Fedor face down on the canvas or whatever, and that's a harder visual to erase. You know what I mean? Like, that's a whole different kind of visual to erase.
And they never come back. Like that could have happened to Anderson's gotten fucked up before, right? Like GSP got knocked out by Matt Serra, but they come back, right? They came back to do much, much more. So. That wasn't the last visual. It's hard when that's the last visual.
Yeah, and like even with Anderson, like when he broke his leg against Weidman, like that was you don't really count. I don't count that against him. I count the first Weidman fight, obviously, but I don't count the second because that. But then you keep going, and you think about the Bisping fight, and again war. But Bisping did what he did. Then you think about
I thought he won that fight.
But again,
he won that fight, and he was knocked. And I thought that fight should have been stopped. Bisping was out, homie.
But you think about the way you kind of tarnish her like that. At that point, I think Anderson was still very, very, very good. You know what I mean? And Michael Bisping, obviously a phenomenal fighter in his own right. But then you go past that, and you think about Anderson fighting Derek Brunson. I love Derek Brunson. This is not a knock on Derek Brunson, but you think about Anderson. You think about Anderson. Chael, you think about Anderson, Marquardt. You think about some of the greater fight. Some of the bigger stars of that era. And then you're just kind of bummed when you're sitting there thinking about Anderson losing to whoever he's losing to. You're just like, man, like, and it's like Fedor. Like, I don't think there's any shame in Fedor losing to Matt Mitrione. I think Matt Mitrione's awesome. But you can't erase the visual of Fedor getting knocked out by Matt Mitrione. That doesn't not count. You can't just say because he was great for 10 years, and you can't say, well, now he's not in his prime anymore. It doesn't count. It all counts. It all counts. It's like BJ. I love BJ. But his record is like 17-14 now. You can't ignore the fact that if he keeps going, he might end up with a 500 record. That's insane.
Yeah.
It's depressing, but you can't ignore it.
It's sad. I don't have much to say.
But you know what I mean, though? Like you can't. Like if George had stuck around, George stuck around and never left, and he had a very close decision with Johnny Hendricks. Now, let's say he comes back, they have a rematch, and Johnny knocks him out in the first round. And then George comes back, and maybe he loses his next one. And then George comes back again, he loses his third one. Then he comes back, maybe ekes out a win, gets a fourth, whatever. Sticks around and just keeps going and ends up with his career ending with like a 4-4 streak.
Right.
You can't ignore those 4 losses just because he was at the tail end of his career. You can't forget about it.
We're not talking about GOAT anymore.
Yeah. You can't. That's why you have to appreciate a guy like John Jones, who has really been doing it for almost a decade now, of what he's been doing. Khabib Nurmagomedov 28-0. You have to appreciate those guys doing what they're doing because it's so hard.
Khabib's in the conversation now, man. I really do. Top 3.
I think if Khabib goes out there, and I think if Khabib beats Tony Ferguson, who I think is probably the biggest challenge he has out there, if he beats Tony Ferguson, he's absolutely in that conversation. I think one more win over a guy like Tony Ferguson, and you're in that. That's like, to me, that's like Jones beating DC. When Jones beat Daniel Cormier, he jumped to that next level where I consider him the GOAT. If Khabib goes out there and beats Tony Ferguson, how can you not put him in that conversation?
He's going to smash Tony Ferguson, bro.
He very well might. He very well might, man. I thought Dustin would do better than he did, and not because I thought Dustin had the greatest wrestling in the world. I just saw his tenaciousness and his ability, because when you think about some of the other guys he's beaten, with keeps him on the end of his punches, things like that.
But look, Dustin's a phenomenal grappler.
He is. He's a black belt.
Phenomenal grappler. He's very, very good. And what Tony's good at is Tony's very good as well. But the style of grappling that Tony implies is going to get smashed by the style of grappling that Khabib implies.
Yeah. Like the matches that I'm like, I hope we get to see one day just because out of curiosity. Like I fully admit I'm a big American wrestling fan. Like I think a guy like Gregor Gillespie, I think is one of the most talented up-and-coming guys in the sport. Obviously, NCAA champion, phenomenal wrestler.
He's losing on November the 2nd.
November the 2nd.
Losing on November the 2nd.
But I want to see one of those. I want to see a wrestler who actually uses wrestling to fight Khabib just to see how he makes that adjustment. He may win. He may dominate. And he may smash them. Well, yeah. Gaethje's absolutely interesting. It's just I'm curious. Like I talked to Gaethje last week, and he's like, when he was in wrestling, he's like, what helps him out in the fight with Khabib is he was never he said, I was never a good offensive wrestler. I was a great defensive wrestler. It's really hard to score on me. And I think that's the key to the guy like Khabib. You got to stop him from putting you down on the ground and beating the hell out of you. And that's what Gaethje succeeds at. Gaethje's probably not going to go out there and out wrestle Khabib. He's just going to stop Khabib from taking him down.
And try to knock him out.
Yeah, but that's what I want to see those kind of matchups where we do see him against a great wrestler. Like, how does he do? Look at George St. Pierre pass with flying colors. I mean, took on Josh Koscheck, beat Josh Koscheck handily, and Josh Koscheck was on paper 10 times the wrestler George St. Pierre. John Fitch, same thing. So that's why you want to see those fights. But yeah, it's hard to see anybody beating Khabib right now. I mean, anybody that's currently in that division, it's hard to pick against him against anybody.
Well, I think Gaethje's going to get the next shot if he beats Cowboy.
He could. He absolutely
after Tony Ferguson. Well, Tony Ferguson's going to get the next shot, and then it's going to be Gaethje.
Yeah,
I could see it.
I love it, and I love like Gaethje is like, God, what a monster that guy is. What a freaking monster that guy is. I love him, and he told me he's like, I asked him because he said that he made an adjustment after his loss to Poirier to where he changed his output, where he's not just throwing everything in the kitchen sink in the opening round trying to get the knockout. He's being a lot less. He's like, if you actually look at my output in my last couple of fights, I'm throwing like 70% less punches, but I'm landing with better accuracy. He's like, I'm fighting smarter. You may not notice it because he's going out there and having the same Justin Gaethje kind of crazy fights. But he's like, if you actually watch my output, I'm actually fighting much smarter. And I said, is this the best you've ever been? And he said, this is the smartest I've ever been, which makes me the best I've ever been. I thought that was a really great quote. I was like, wow, that really said something about Justin Gaethje, because you're not seeing a difference in terms of him going out there and suddenly he's fighting boring fights. He's just being smarter with his output. And I think that is the key against a guy like Khabib. You can't go out there and hope to get a first-round knockout when it doesn't come. Hope you can survive 4 rounds with that guy, because it probably ain't going to happen.
Well, because Gaethje, I mean, like we've seen Gaethje get very tired, right? So you can't get tired against Khabib.
No, that is a guy who will feast on you. He will feast on you.
He gets you tired. He gets everyone tired. Poirier has phenomenal conditioning, right? Like these guys have phenomenal conditioning, and he gets everyone tired. Like Conor, we've seen come through the tired before, and Conor couldn't come through it with Khabib. It's just too swarming.
And the scary thing about Khabib, look at the Poirier fight from the other night. Poirier caught him in that guillotine. Best chance of the fight for him to win. He didn't get it, but he went for it so hard his arms were just wasted at that moment.
He was done.
And Khabib seized on it. He knew it. In that moment, he knew it. And how quickly after he got out of that guillotine did he get that submission? Because he was done. Yeah. He knew, and he seized on it. And that's, again, what makes Khabib so great. He knew that Dustin was tired. He knew that he's like, you're not going to make it to the 4th round. and boom, put him away.
He was mentally tired as well, right? Because like when you're so close, when you feel like you're so close right there, and then it doesn't work out, like your mental that crushes you a little.
Yeah. So that's another thing that makes Khabib so great is he will seize on it. Like he will absolutely seize on your weakness, your moment of weakness, whatever it is. That guy will absolutely go for the kill, and that guy has a killer instinct, unlike anybody in the sport right now, in my opinion. Like I think that guy's instinct to know when you're on your way out, he will send you there.
Yep, no doubt. All right, man, I got to wrap this up. But before we do, what can I do better? Give me an assessment.
You know what? I got to be honest. I really enjoyed the fun conversation. I just enjoyed the fun conversation. Wasn't a lot of questions in there. It was just a fun conversation, and that's my favorite kind of podcast. So that's my feedback. Keep the conversation going, man. I like the conversation. I enjoy it like that. I'm
trying not to interview. Like I don't like interviewing people.
Yeah, I did my. I'm trying to talk. My podcast I did with Matt Brown for a long time. Matt's my boy. That was what made it a good podcast is we didn't interview each other. We're just having a conversation. We get off on all kinds of crazy. Watching Matt Brown and Mark Coleman talk to each other was in and of itself an adventure. But there was no interview. You know what I mean? I wasn't asking questions. Right. It was just fun. And so, yeah, I enjoy that. The conversation, man, that makes it. So, yeah, that's what
Rogan. I mean, like, who's the pod god? Rogan.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. How do you never know? You never know what you're going to get in the Joe Rogan podcast. You never ever know what you're going to get in the Joe Rogan podcast, and that's what I like about it. So yeah, keep the conversation going, man. That's my only advice.
Cool. All right, I appreciate it, man. I will. So this is going to come out Monday. I will send you a link if you could share. That would be amazing.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Right. I will see you. Are you going to be at the Madison Square Garden show?
Hopefully so. I love New York.
Oh, God, I love New York. I love New York. I mostly love New York because I get to go to Henzo's when I go to New York.
And everyone, I always joke when the guys with Henzo's fight at Madison Square Garden. I'm like, so are you walking to the fight? Because I don't think most people realize how close Henzo's gym is to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, Henzo's right in the Mecca, man.
Oh, I love it.
So cool. All right, homie. Have a great day, and I will. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, guys. Find your power.